What's up, team? Sean from Vesta Live here, and this is our second week or our second episode of doing some live real estate chats on Sundays. I know it's always tough with short notice to get here live, so feel free to watch us whenever it's convenient. But what I wanted to do is give folks a chance to, ask some real questions, ask questions about what they're seeing and what they're dealing with. And it could be that you're getting started or you're very advanced or you have specific things you want to talk about. So as usual, whether you're watching this live or watching it later, feel free to drop questions in the comments, of course. What I want to do is start with some things that I actually took action on this week. I'm a big fan of not just talking the talk, but actually getting out and walking the walk. So one of the things I really focused on with this upcoming week was, what can I do coming out of last Sunday to really propel forward some of the things that I'm working on? So I thought I'd just transparently drop an idea of what I have going on and who I've been contacting. So one of the big challenges for anyone who's in real estate, especially on the larger sort of commercial side of things, is you have to really make sure you're regularly checking out the lenders. Hey, Raj, I'll hit you up in a second. One of the big things that, we're always focusing on when you're looking for lending, especially in terms of multifamily, especially commercial, is you really have to talk to as many folks as you can on the lending side. So coming out of last week's call, I started putting out my feelers again. I had a great conversation with a really large national asset-based lender. So the idea here is they're not looking at my income. They're not worried about my credit score. They're not worried about me, the borrower. They're really worried about the property I'm looking at, where I'm looking at it. And they're looking at the ratios. I want to talk about something interesting on this front as well that we're going to be doing here in terms of structuring a deal. So it's actually pretty interesting. So what I want to talk about first and foremost is there's two things I'm looking to do in the near term. Number one, I'm looking to pick up an office property that's actually in the same state as where I live. It's a really good deal. And secondly, I'm looking at a 24-unit apartment building. I'll talk about both of these in a second. So first and foremost, I'm looking at this office property. I've had my eyes on it for a while. And hey, Big Ray, feel free to drop it in here again. I'll hit you in a second. So in the office property, we've been looking at this building for a while. It is in a really prime location. It's near a number of other sort of business service needs and customers. So we had been following this for a while. It's been sitting on the market. Prices dropped a few times. Now the owner is offering full seller financing. We're actually going to be making an offer on that probably mid to end of the week, and we're going to be coming in a bit low. So we're actually looking at almost, let's say give or take, we're going to be about 25% lower than the current asking price. We're still going to be asking for that seller financing, but what we're willing to do is potentially talk about shortening the term or slight increase in the interest rate just to see what we can get here in terms of some interest. The building is fully leased and in pretty good shape, but I think the problem is if you are in the office building space and you don't have sort of the means to make sure you can update it, do the right things, get it up to, raising this class from like a C class to a B class. And that's what we're looking at here. And then secondly, the reason I talked to this asset-based manager or lender rather, is I'm looking at a 24-unit apartment building. Primarily, I invest across the southeast and sort of central south area. So I think like Texas, Oklahoma to the East Coast, right? Anywhere in there, I'm pretty good. I like that area. It's generally good places, good returns. But I've had my eyes up in Ohio for a while. And there's a couple of really good teams up there. I happen to be talking to this specific lender, and she said she has a rather large portfolio there herself and was going to introduce me to a couple of folks. So I'm actually looking at a couple of apartment buildings. I want to structure a nice deal where I can put them all together. We're looking to do like a total of, give or take, around 50 total units. And with the debt service coverage ratios or DSCRs being so great up there, they basically are saying I can bring $0 cash to the table. And I want to explain this real quick. Then I'm going to jump into some of the questions that are here. So one of the things I'm always looking to do when I'm talking about picking up additional properties or adding more units is I really want to make sure that I'm bringing as little cash to the table as possible. Now, we're not talking circa 2006 and 7 here, where you're showing fake income or fake documents or things like that, or ninja loans, right? No income, no job, no assets. What we were talking about was, could I use some of my paid off properties as the full collateral to do these bigger deals so that I still end up with the total equity necessary to do the deal? So in a sense, it's structuring a brand new purchase, almost like a refinance, in a sense that we're going to just use the equity in another building as the down payment on this larger purchase. So the goal here is to do more of that to really expand this thing. And what I'd love to do is get up to, 500 to 1,000 units here in the next couple of years. So I just want to call it out that like I'm out here, I'm really doing it. I'm trying to make it scale. I'm talking to the lenders on a regular basis, so I'm seeing a lot of these questions. Now, I want to jump into some of the stuff here in the chat, and I appreciate it, team. It doesn't have to be a long show if there's not a lot of stuff to ask, but I just want to call this out because I think Raj has a good point. He's sitting at Target right now, super packed everywhere. And then, of course, where's the recession? So it's funny, Raj, I was thinking about this the other night. We were at yesterday, I don't know if anyone saw this from me tweeting, but I was actually at the PLL or Premier Lacrosse quarterfinals with my son. He's a big lacrosse player. And we were just sort of noticing like people are just pumping money out, no big deal. The whole area, there's a lot of commercial retail in that area, all packed, all slamming. And it's hard to say, right? Like we're seeing the recession, we're seeing some pressure on pricing, but it's not as clear cut as it has been in the past. I think a lot of times when we see these major drops, it's very specific areas that get hit hard, right? In 01, it was the blow up of the IPO market that affected everyone's retirements, it affected portfolios, it affected wealth. In 08, it was specific to adjustable rate mortgages and the home buyer process, ended up with tons of vacant properties. I think what's different about what we're dealing with right now is it's very predictable in a sense that it's based on interest rates, it's based on inflation, but things that we can sort of ascertain what's likely to happen or what's going on there. And as it applies specifically to the real estate markets, look, people still are looking for places to live. My understanding in talking to some folks in the loan game have been that for the most part, applications are still relatively strong. People do, in fact, have the money to actually buy these homes and properties. So for what it's worth, they're still not seeing that level of pressure that I think we're looking at that you would expect with a recession. So just want to call that out because even talking to a couple of my buddies who are realtors, although they're not seeing necessarily the wild over asking pricing, they still are seeing demand and people still are buying. And talking to the folks that I'm friendly with in sort of the commercial markets buying for investing, they're not really slowing down. They're using this as just an opportunity to negotiate a little bit of price pressure, and then they're still going to act. And I think that's sort of the same boat that I'm in, where I'm in the game long term. So if I can get some decrease in price at purchase, and this is a great time to do it, then I'm going to do it. The other thing I'm looking at as well, something to consider, I'm looking to buy portfolios as well. So what this means is on the investment side of the house, rather than looking at one building or one single family or 1 3 family or whatever it might be, what I'm looking to do is basically say to folks like, hey, look, if you're interested in getting rid of your entire portfolio, maybe we can work out a deal, get it all off your plate all at once. And I think this is the way you can really grow fast if you're in a position to take advantage of it. So I just want to call that out as well. So Ray, I'm going to jump into your question here. Do you have any advice getting into real estate development? My brother wants to tear down his triplex and construct a 16 unit. Slightly hesitant to work with him due to other reasons. And then, of course, the follow-up is interested in doing something similar myself. So I'm going to give like a real honest take on this. Developers have their S together. They are some of the most legit people out there when it comes to the real estate world. So I don't know your background, Ray, if you are in construction and development or architecture or engineering or your brother for that matter. The one thing I would say is that this is it's a very profitable game to be in as long as you have the team and the capital to make it happen. I do personally get into development work, but just from the money standpoint, I don't necessarily put hammer to nail or wood to wall. There's actually someone I sort of work with on Twitter quite a bit where he's going to be launching a fairly sizable development, and he had reached out about potentially coming in as a capital partner. So I'm definitely involved in on my end. I think the question though, really what it comes down to is, in your brother's case, if we put these other unknown reasons aside, if you can move a triplex into a 16 unit, it seems like it's a no-brainer, and it's just going to end up being math. I think the question is like, how fast will it take to fill in those 16 units? Where is it located? What does the market look like? And what are the terms you're getting on it? I tend to be a little bit, I'm not a developer by nature. I want to call that out. So for me, it's not a natural process to go in and look at things from the standpoint of tearing something down and adding something better. I'm more approaching it from like the investor side of it, which is I'm looking for a place where I can do a value add opportunity. That 3 family, like, could you potentially turn that basement into a 4th family? Is there an attic you could make into a studio? Or even things like more on the commercial side of it. Excuse me. On the commercial side of it, can I increase rents to some degree to get a higher cap rate and then sell that thing for a better return, right? Those are the kind of things I'm looking at. Ray, I don't know if you want to add more details there, if you've done this before, you've developed before or not, but just to call it out, I'd be interested to see what else you want to share on that front, because I've certainly been interested to learn more about it. The other thing I want to talk about too, just while I have some time here, is we're seeing a sort of shift. I was actually just looking at something earlier this morning. I was out getting coffee this morning, which I haven't even had yet. It's sitting next to me. And someone was talking to me about this shift that more and more brokers are realizing, mortgage brokers are realizing that they need to have better programs for more investors in different types of ways, because we've really seen this shift to, your traditional real estate investor, which is going to be that buy and hold, right? Where I'm getting into a property and I'm going to sit in it for a long period of time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the call out here is, as we see more folks move into that short-term rental market, invest lenders to investors having to get more creative about that income. Oh, okay, Ray, I'm going to share this on the screen because I think this is a great. Working a master's in real estate development. That's awesome. Looking to buy my third property in the next 6 months-ish. Looking to do bigger projects after that. Yeah, number one, man, good for you and congrats on getting that master's in real estate dev. That's awesome. We've got a couple good. I'm in the Boston area. We've got some really good schools that have some great development programs. So that's really cool, man. That's an amazing thing to get. Actually, my neighbor is getting real estate management a bachelor's, and he was saying to me, like, he couldn't believe how much engineering and math was in it, and I was like, well, that's because it's serious stuff. But I think getting that master's in development's really cool, man. In fact, Ray, if you're not already talking about that, I know you guys do some stuff, but I think there'd be a great audience that would love to learn more about that and what you're going through and the kind of things you're learning. I think that'd be really interesting as well. But yeah, I think for me, to sum it up in the simplest possible way is it's just about the math. I could care less about the details sometimes and the things that I do. I'm all about the math. High up in the apartment management company, so he has a good connections in the world. It's company management. Oh, okay, cool. Ray, where is this located? Where is he looking to do this deal? So I think that's a big question as well. Like in the MSAs that I'm working in primarily, what I'm really thinking about is, are we seeing growth in population? And I'm going to assume you mean Portland, Oregon, because I'm in New England, so I think Portland. I'm thinking Maine, which also is not a bad area to do this stuff too, by the way, with all the schools. So that's really interesting as well. Yeah, and something to think about too about sharing that information, because I don't think there's a lot of developers out there who, frankly, are sharing like what the development process looks like, how financing works, how to put together those projects. I think for sure that one of the biggest things that is scary about development is the amount of money you have to have up front, the relationships you need to have, and then how easily you can transition to putting the last nail in the last board and then opening the doors for rent, and how you line those renters up ahead of time. Just something to think about too. I'm seeing a lot of that happen around here. The other problem that I want to call out today that we haven't previously talked about on the show is we're seeing a lot of very anti-landlord rhetoric hitting, and I think it's hitting in a lot of the major cities, especially depending on the type of city and what the population density looks like and things like that. But here in Massachusetts, we're seeing a lot of sort of cities surrounding Boston really starting to create new rules, new pressure on real estate owners and investors and developers too, for that matter, on what they can do when they sell, what kind of concessions they have to give to their renters. It's getting very complex and very confusing. And I think one thing that a lot of folks don't talk about that's really important to understand here at scale is, outside of buying your first house, maybe a couple small investment properties, if you're thinking about getting to the bigger things, the apartment buildings, the commercial properties, etc., one thing you have to really make sure you have is a strong and competent attorney who specializes in the things you're looking to do. And I just want to mention this for a second because I think it's really often missed but important. Your like local attorney that you use all the time that might help you close on, your single family that you're going to live in, or maybe handles things like, wills or trusts or, divorces, right? Things like that. Although those attorneys are typically extremely skilled and really great at what they do, there is something to be said for starting to make relationships with attorneys who specialize in, commercial real estate specific to the areas you're focusing on, especially if you're thinking about raising outside capital, excuse me, or anything like that as well. I think too many folks have like their family attorney that they think like, hey, it's a good person, I use them all the time. You really got to get out of the weeds here and realize that spending a couple $100 for a conversation with someone who's an extreme specialist in this topic, it's worth its weight in gold. I can't stress that enough, that having the ability to get someone with actual expertise on the contract and closure side is a massive, massive value. So I just want to call that out as well. I know we're not that far into the episode here, and I don't create any sort of time. But I guess what I wanted to share was, if there's not a lot of questions, I'm happy to call it quit at 15 minutes in. I did want to also point out too that one of the comments I got last week, I'm going to do a deeper dive on it, but was really like, what does the actual process look like for folks who are not on the investment side of things or not on the commercial side of things, but really just like getting to your first home purchase or your first buy? I think one of the things that's really sort of stands out is like, yeah, this is a scary process, and it feels like there's a lot that goes in there. And last week I had really talked a lot about this idea of not waiting. Get out and get that pre-approval process. Get out and get something that actually gives you an idea of excuse me, what you need to do to get going on that. So I want to talk about that for just a moment here. Um, it can feel very daunting to start. I will tell you, for everybody, I don't care who you are or how long you're doing it. Even still, when I open up that paperwork and have to think about filling it out now, I'm like, oh gosh, all the work, all the numbers, all the things I have to deliver on. It's such a pain in the butt. And there's a whole nother conversation to be had about whether that should change or how it's going to change or what it's going to look like in the future. What I did want to call out is, when you're doing this for the first time, it can feel very nerve wracking. And I think a lot of things we get nervous about, it's like, well, they're going to pull my credit and I have to be able to show all this income and all these things. Um, it's not complex. That's the beauty of this. Is real estate, when done correctly, is a path to wealth, even if it's just buying your own home, right? Over time, the appreciation, the paying down the mortgage, that overall growth, and knowing that predictable monthly payment, especially when inflation with money happens and that payment stays the same, real estate is a path to growth. So don't let little things like filling out a form or a couple forms really get in the way. And what I would say is, for those who have never done it before, it's a really important call out that the process of actually getting approved is not that hard, frankly. It feels very hard on the front end, but it's actually not. So some of the things they're going to be looking at right off the bat is, you're going to fill out the form. You're going to essentially, all the standards, who you are, copies of your IDs, all that kind of stuff. And then what they usually will want is like 2 paychecks, your 2 most recent paychecks, some sort of a copy of your bank statement, basically to show like where those paychecks are going and what you might have in the bank. They're going to want to understand things like, do you have any assets and where are they, right? This could be your 401k. This could be a stock account. It could be cash that you keep in the bank, whatever the question is. And I think that's really the extent of getting started. They're going to pull your credit. They're going to give that to you so you know what's going on. And then it's very nice to have a conversation around, what's good, what's not good, what you can improve on, and what you're looking at for the ability to buy. So it gives you sort of an idea of where you can start to look, what you're going to be looking at and looking through. And it's not something to be scared of. It's a good thing every once in a while to go and understand what that looks like. And if you're nervous about getting pre-approved because you're working on your credit or you're trying to increase your income, you can go and ask for something really basic like a pre-qualification and just say, look, a ballpark idea without pulling my credit. What could I afford if this is what I make? This is how much I have to put down. And they can even do that for you too. And that's a real simple process. It takes like 5 minutes to do that. Excuse me. Ray, I appreciate all the questions also, by the way. I think many people want to know, but have you ever done portfolio loans and anything to avoiding them? Yeah, for sure. I've been on both sides of this. I've been on the side as an originator doing portfolio loans and other more complex loans, as well as using them. And I'm actually going through this process right now to tie a number of paid off properties into buying a really big complex. So a portfolio loan is very different than sort of your standard like home loan, where you know what it is, you have an expectation of what it's going to look like. A portfolio loan is a bit different in a sense. Banks are taking on a bit of a different degree of risk, and is one way to think about it, right? So these are not considered like a conforming loan, so to speak, right? So the idea here is that it's being called a portfolio loan because many times they're going to keep it on their portfolio. And what it means is they're not looking at it from you, particularly as a borrower buying. They're looking at it purely for the assets, the income that's being generated from what's within that portfolio. And it's reason to also call it a portfolio or blanket loan sometimes is it can be laid over multiple properties. That makes it more complex than regularly just buying your own home. So when I think about a portfolio loan, what comes to mind immediately is I'm either talking to asset-based lenders or I'm talking to like credit unions. A lot of times credit unions are great for this when you're on the smaller side. And the reason for this is even if you're using things like Fannie Mae or FHA or Freddie Mac or all of the sort of government-backed insurance agencies, they have limits, right? It might be for some that you can only have 4 mortgages at any one time. Some will bump that number up to 10. But the problem is that's to keep them conforming. What conforming means is they're going to then take that mortgage and they're essentially going to sell it, right? They're going to sell it out to the market, to a secondary market, to investors. The problem with that is so I occasionally invest in MBS or mortgage-backed securities because there's pretty good returns on them. And so I want to make sure that, we all have seen the movie The Big Short. I don't want to invest in something that's going to explode and be worth nothing. So we're going to be really making sure that we have all the right pieces structured inside of this loan based on guidelines and restrictions so that I fit the perfect example of what's being borrowed. That can now be packaged and sold to investors, and they know exactly what's going to be in it. So a portfolio loan is a loan that, a bank, a lender, a credit union is going to keep on their own books. They're typically not going to sell it to a secondary market, and they're going to accept the risk and the return on that loan. That's why it's called a portfolio loan, because it's their portfolio. The nice thing about portfolio loans is you can have better and deeper conversations about what you're trying to accomplish, why certain things look certain ways. I'm talking like literally this morning, before I even turned this on, I was listening to something that a lot more traditional brokers are starting to understand the need to find lenders who are going to have and hold portfolio loans because the needs are so much higher. And the reason for this is really simple. When you invest in real estate, your goal is often to try to find ways to have or avoid the major tax implications, right? So you're going to have things written off. You're going to have things that are held on the side that will look like an expense. We talked about this last week, like, a maintenance hold, a CapEx hold. There could be property management coming out. There could be a vacancy hold, right? So maybe you've got 5%, 5%, 5%, 10% being pulled out. You're not actually losing that money. You're just simply taking it and setting it aside. But on paper, the problem is a lot of traditional lenders don't understand where these pieces of money are going, how we're breaking down the loan, and the ability to pay back that mortgage. With a portfolio situation, it's going to be very clear. Here's the rent. Here's the expenses. Here's what we can afford for a mortgage. It makes sense. It has a certain degree of protection built in it. They're going to hold it on their books and understand what's happening with you and the way you borrow. Where I think the question is there anything I like or avoid in them? I think if you can find local banks that can get to know you, I think that's a major like. And I think if you can find rates that are close or applicable to local rates for any commercial mortgage, I think you're in good shape there. I don't think there's anything to avoid. I just think you have to go in there and understand they don't want to hear that, like, you invest in REITs, so you're very experienced in real estate investing. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people think it's that simple. I don't think there's anything to avoid. I think just make sure you understand all of the implications. And this is a great question. So in talking to this asset-based lender, which is a portfolio lender, they called it out very clear that their terms are 3, 5, 7, and 10-year terms. I'll explain this in a second. And they still do 30-year amortization. However, there is full prepayment penalty, okay? This is very different than when you get a normal conventional loan. If you go and get a mortgage for your first single-family home and you pay that thing off in a year, you own it. It's yours. No big deal. You don't own interest on those other 29 years. A lot of lenders, especially because they need to guarantee their return, and even those who are going to sell it to a securitized market, they need to make sure that when they're committing to an investor or to their own internal board that they're going to make 7%, they need to be able to commit to that 7% expectation long term. So the biggest problem that you'll run into sometimes, not all the time, is they're going to give you very flexible terms, but it's a balloon payment. And what that means is when I said that 3, 5, 7, 9, 10, whatever, it's going to give you 3 years to pay back that entire mortgage, but your payments will look like it's a 30-year mortgage. So it means you can have very nice cash flow, you can have very low payments, but the expectation is you're going to be out of that loan in 3 years, 5, 7, whatever. The idea here isn't really that you're paying it off, right? The idea is you're going to refinance or you're going to sell it to another investor at that time. And typically you'll use that money to sort of go into another property or open up another loan. So it's important to understand that the terms are very, very different. They're based on expectations of what the returns will be for the lender. And it pays to know the difference because I know a lot of people have tried to get things done. They think they're getting a 30-year mortgage, and then a 5-year balloon comes around because they misunderstood it. And this was a big thing that happened in '07 and '08, is everyone thought they could just indefinitely refinance, and they couldn't. So if you think you're going to get into a killer deal, and then 2 years in, you want to get out of it, well, great, you can get out of it, but you owe them all of the interest on that deal. So know that going in, know that those are consequences you're going to deal with if you've never done it before. So, Ray, hopefully that sort of answered it a bit. I think they're complex. What I would ask is if you or anyone else who watches this has questions here, feel free to drop them in. I'm even happy to go and pull some mortgage folks on and have them talk through it. My buddy does a lot of high end real estate. He said he's going to be jumping on in a couple of weeks, so we'll have that too to ask those questions. I think there's other things that go on with portfolio loans as well. Is that sometimes you can have what you call like a bridge loan. A bridge loan is essentially like I'm bridging the deal so I can properly get my long-term financing. So it's important to understand that there's a lot of different ways to purchase, own, and reposition commercial real estate, or really any real estate for that matter, but primarily commercial real estate, in a way that you can get temporary financing, lead that into permanent financing, etc. So Ray, thanks so much for the question. So Jackalope, good to see you again. Terrified of buying a first home at the top right now, especially with the interest rates on the rise. Kind of salty watching all my friends who were able to buy a home 5 years ago double up. Yeah, you know what? This is like a really, really fair comment, and what I think probably more people than we think are feeling on a regular basis, to be totally frank here. So, excuse me. So I think the biggest problem is understanding where the top even is, and does it affect what you're trying to do. When I think in terms of buying at the top, what I'm more concerned about is getting the home appraised and be able to get a mortgage. Because if your plan is to hold the home for long term, over that long term course of the loan, you're going to end up being okay, because it's for a number of reasons. I don't want to go like super deep into the weeds here because it can be complex, but I'm happy to go deeper on this separately. Um, I think that what I'm seeing across the board, and I've talked to a bunch of folks who work in different locations, I'm talking about the US here, different states in the US, is we know interest rates are climbing, and they've climbed significantly. And what we also are seeing is it's delivering some pressure on the home price to come down. One thing I would really call out is if you haven't gotten pre-approved, you should definitely think about doing that, and then have a really candid conversation about what you're looking to do. You can house hack, you can look for something that needs a little bit of work. Depending on the location you're in, maybe those things aren't possible. But something to really think about is like you're going to have two levers that are helping you to sort of end up okay here. And of course, like, look, I don't mean this to be funny, but I don't know anyone's personal financial situation, so I'm not offering financial advice here, just more like general real estate thoughts. When all the homes that sort of blew up in '08 are now worth more than they were then, right? So I know that's just one point in time, but you can go back in time and see the way price increases. That's because inflation is inherently built into our financial system. So this means that even though we'll have some periods of dips and drops, and some periods of highs and lows and everything else in between, overall on the long trend, we do typically scale upward over time. The other thing to think about is if you're putting down, let's just say you're a first time home buyer, let's assume you're going to go FHA, 3.5% down. That means all you're putting down for every $100,000 is $3,500. There'll be some closing costs, but they're not that bad. So just say you're looking to buy a $500,000 home. Let's assume you're going to have to put down in the neighborhood of about 18K, right? Somewhere in that neighborhood. You're putting 18K down to have a $500,000 asset in your name, right? With every single payment you make, you're adding equity to your home, and with natural inflation of pricing, you're also gaining on that end as well. So every single month you make a payment, you've added a little bit more equity. And the longer you're in that loan, the more and more equity you're adding. So you're getting the benefit of both long-term growth of appreciation as well as short-term increase in equity, or equity being what you own of that home value. So I think it's super, super scary. And it's also really crappy when you look at your friends who've done great things. I'll give you a real example, just so you know I'm not bull crapping you here. This is actually like totally true. I bought the house I was in previous to the house I'm in now. I bought for $297,000. It was 4 beds, 2 baths. At the time in the area I bought, this wasn't a really hot area. People weren't here. They weren't buying. So we went in and said, look, we just want something small for now until we figure out where we're going to end up. So we bought this house. Did a little bit of work on it. 2 years later, a house we really wanted to hit the market. So we ended up buying this house. I sold that house literally after 2.5 years for only about 25K more than I paid. I looked at it as like, hey, no big deal. It was a safe place to put my money. Got into the house I wanted to get into. Lo and behold, the kid who bought it just sold my $300,000 house for 770K, just a couple years later. So, I take the approach of like, I could be a little bit salty about the fact that, he essentially 2.5x'd the investment in the home. But at the same time, I'm like, hey, I still ended up where I wanted to end up. So I just am not bothered by it at all. I think good for him and it's good for the market overall. All that does, in my perspective, is help the value of the house I'm in right now continuously increase. And every time another house hits the market and sells for more, it helps me as well. I will not deny a 2.5 return is insane. But I bought a house down in Memphis about a year ago, give or take. I invest in Memphis pretty heavily. Paid 161,000 for it, 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,700 square feet. Within 6 months, I'm already getting offers of 220, 225, 240. So, even when things seem like they're really tough out there, it's important to look at the long string as much as possible in terms of the real estate market. The other thing I would throw out there too, not to belabor the point, but there's nothing stopping you from coming in with a little bit more reasonable pricing to what you think is fair. I know interest rates are high, and I would use that as a lever to look at houses that have been on the market for longer than 30 days, especially longer than 60 days. And if it's longer than 90, that's in a place I'm going to get aggressive. So if you're looking to buy a single family home or a condo or a 2 or 3 or 4 that you want to live in, this is a great time to think about it, because anything that's been sitting is going to be hard to sell, and they're going to have to drop that pricing. Sometimes you have to help them understand that as a buyer and get them to proactively drop the price for you versus someone else. So, that's my 2 cents. Drew, I'm going to switch over and Jackalope, thanks for the question. Drew, yeah, you know what? This to me is like the most asked question I ever get. And I think the better question is like, why are you paying it off early and what's the purpose behind it? I'll give you 2 perfect examples of it. Some of my single family rentals, what I do is I'll either pay cash or pay them off, and then I'll use them as collateral to do bigger deals. So for me, the value in paying it off is so I can use it as leverage to get a much, much bigger return on a much bigger property. So a perfect example, I was saying at the very beginning of this that I'm looking at a couple of 20 to 25 unit buildings. So those buildings are selling for around $1 million a piece. So what I would have to do is put 25% down. That's 250K. The house I was just using the example that I'm getting offers of 240 on. What I did is I went to the lender and I said, look, rather than bring $250,000 down, I can bring closing down in cash, but I'll put that house on the mortgage as the collateral for the 20% down. And they were like, yep, perfect. We only care about equity. So in that case, from an investment perspective, it was a no-brainer. It's going to act as my collateral. I just essentially used it as a temporary piggy bank to get that inflationary pressure on my money and then reuse it to get a mortgage on everything. Now, in terms of like your private property, I have no doubt that everyone who hears this is going to expect this answer. It absolutely has to do, on one hand, with the math. I refinanced my personal residence about a year ago, actually now, give or take about a year, and got a 2.75 refi on it. So the question is, where am I going to go where I cannot beat that 275 in terms of, instead of putting money into my house to pay it off, could I just go and put it into an index fund or a REIT or somewhere else? So from the math perspective, the investment perspective, it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever to pay off a mortgage early. From the standpoint of inflation, it makes no sense to pay it off early, because over time of you owning your home, that payment you make is worth less and less and less in the real market and based on what you have for income. So even from the income and inflation perspective, it also makes absolutely no sense at all. But I happen to also live in the real world where math is not the answer to every question. And I think that this raises a really good point of, well, what if a mortgage causes me to not sleep at night? Or what if I want to retire really young, or I'm on the FIRE journey and I want to get out of my mortgage so it's a payment I don't have to have, which means it's a job I don't have to have? Well, if that's the case, then I think it's a totally different scenario. I, I lead everything I do in terms of math, but that being said, I also lead in terms of personal comfort. I want to understand how secure I am. I want to understand if I'm doing the right things for my family and for my overall investing. I think that if I had the opportunity to sort of easily pay my house off, I would probably take that opportunity, even if I had better things to do with the money. But I'm saying that because I'm already so heavily invested in the markets and in real estate, and I own businesses. I think that if your only goal in paying off a mortgage is because you don't want to have the payment, I would really question, well, what else could you do with the money instead? And the other thing to call out too is paying off your mortgage is extremely risky if done the wrong way. So let's just say, for example, your plan is to add 500 a month to your mortgage, right? And you're going to do that every month until you eventually pay it off, right? Well, number one, you're not able to write off the interest on your taxes, and you're going to you'll be able to write off the interest, but you're cutting down the interest you pay. So what I often have seen as being a great solution here is, what if instead of trying to add 500 bucks a month to your mortgage, you took that 500 and put it into like, an index fund or something like that. And again, not financial advice here, but like, if you could take that 500 or whatever it is, throw it into another place, and then when it finally has hit the point that you can now use that and wipe out your entire mortgage, maybe that's the better play from a risk perspective. And what I mean by that is this: what if you suddenly lost your job, and you was say a recession hit that was really bad, like '01 or '08, and everybody was letting people go, there were no jobs to be had. No one's going to care that you've made extra payments in your house. They're still going to foreclose on it if you can't make your payments. And for the bank or the lender, you now have a house with a lot of equity. They're really going to want to foreclose on you. They're not going to want to go after the person who has zero in equity, that now they own a house that's worth less than they're going to owe on it, right? Or less than the debt that they gave on it. So the goal here is in terms of risk and math, and then that feeling of stress-free or financial independence. And I think the way I look at that hierarchy is really key, because I don't care if you have 50% of your house paid off. No one's going to care if you're not paying your next bill. So it's more important to have that money accessible and usable in terms of an emergency or a job loss or whatever, than simply having your house slightly paid off faster when you're still not even close to having it paid off. So I don't know if I answered the question, but like, for me personally, that is, I need to be able to write a check to pay the entire thing off, or it's not worth me throwing extra money at it, because the theoretical interest savings sound great, but I'm writing those off anyways. So it's not really like it's that huge of a deal if I save it on the back end, if I was going to be writing it off on the front end earlier. That's my take on it. Big Ray, yeah, that's cool. I would love to get your take on this and what you're hearing in the market, and I can go a little bit deeper on this as well. I've got some friends who work on this, so I'll bring them on in a future episode to talk deeper about this commercial side of things as well. This is actually a comment I want to call it too. Used to live in Cleveland, where homeownership was right around the corner, but been in Denver since 18, so the housing market is way more expensive. So I was doing a considerable amount of business out in Denver and Boulder, which, by the way, man, I love Denver and Boulder. Like, I absolutely would love eventually to be able to end up there. And this is a great dichotomy. I think this is a good and really fair call out. Is in Cleveland, you can still buy a single family for under 100K. You can buy a two family for under 200K, no problem. I mean, no problem. Right now, you can go do that today. Doing that same thing in Denver, as Jekyll calls out, is really difficult, frankly. And it's also really difficult because the home prices have not only appreciated, but they've exploded upwards. And we've seen a lot of people move to Colorado in general, which only creates more price pressure upwards. So I think, and I can totally understand that this is where, for me personally, I would be definitely feeling the same way of like, man, not only are prices up, but they seem to keep going up. And I think it's a really fair call out too, that in a lot of markets, Cleveland's a great example. You can go in and you can lowball and you can get yourself a nice property. In Colorado, you lowball, you're probably getting nothing. You're probably coming in at ask or higher. And I think the question or the fear, and I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but I think the fear for me would be, where does the top even end? And are we even going to see a top, right? A lot of major markets still have never really truly come down. Like, people love to talk about, like, San Francisco or Boston or New York. And I think Denver fits right there as well. They never really saw that downtrend. Even when things kind of hit the floor, those are such premier tier one markets that there'll always be an investor who's willing to jump in and buy at low price. I mean, myself, if suddenly, the in city location for New York or Boston or Denver for that matter suddenly came way down, I'm coming in to buy those properties, and so is everyone I know. So I think there's a lot of floor protection in terms of downward pressure that's going to catch that floor, because people might stop investing in Cleveland, but they're not going to stop investing in Denver. So I think it's a really fair call out and a good reason to feel that stress. That said, you know, I think you still got to think about a way to do it. Oh, this is great. I didn't know you worked for property management. Um, oh, that's really cool. I'd love to get your take on that sometime if you're ever open to it. I think this is a good call out too. That in terms of my portfolio, I'm not seeing any pressure for rents to go down at all. I tend to be the lower price in the areas that I'm in, but on purpose. I have almost no vacancies ever. And it's because I take really good care of the properties and I keep the rents lower than other people in the area. So my goal is to make sure I never have vacancies and I have happy tenants and I have people who are living a good life. And I think that has led me to not have to worry about ever looking at bringing my pricing down, or or for that matter, really looking at the pressure of having to get someone new in there if they happen to move out. I think there's consideration there as well from the standpoint of looking at those markets. Like in debt, I guess my question actually would be, and I'm gonna totally play the I don't know card here because I don't currently look at Colorado whatsoever. Are there like opportunities to house hack in Denver and Boulder? I would think they are. They're probably expensive, but could you get like a 2 or 3 bedroom home and rent those rooms out? Are there, duplexes or triplexes in those areas? I get the feeling probably not that many. But I'd be curious what you're running into, because that might be a great way to think about getting in there. Is if you can throw some friends in the other units. I mean, you could be married with kids. I have no idea, but that's sort of something definitely to think about. If you can find a way to kind of hack your way into it a little bit, it might be a good call. A good friend of mine who I work with just bought a place in just outside of Washington D.C. And DC is major big bucks right now. They've had no downward pressure on pricing. And the way he looked at it was like, look, I'm going to buy at the top, but I'm going to see if I can get this extra room in my condo rented out. So he was able to do that, was able to get himself some serious monthly savings. And he's treating that as that secondary income is helping to pay down and build the equity in the home, as well as create a buffer in his income anyways, just in case he ever did see something happen, he wouldn't have to be concerned with it. And his goal also is to be in there long term and then hold it as a rental property afterwards. So just want to call that out. Um, yeah, that's perfect. I had a feeling. So yeah, so there's some opportunity to do some house hacking. Um, oh yeah, okay. I mean, you're sort of like we're reading each other's minds here. I think this is a good call out too. Like, depending on where you are, picking up a thing like a duplex or a triplex is no problem. In New England, where I am, I mean, they're everywhere. You almost can't avoid it. Um, uh, but the problem is a lot of modern markets aren't building these anymore, right? We're not seeing the 2, 3, and 4 families getting built new because it's a little bit harder to sell them. People tend to be a little bit intimidated by buying them. They don't always want to live in them. So you end up with a lot of investors who are like, well, why would I pay for a brand new 3 family if I can get an apartment building that needs some work for around the same price? So it's a good call out, especially in the area you're in, man. And hey, Jason, thanks for jumping on. So, uh, do I invest in Pittsburgh? And then, perfect timing to jump in there, right? Like, just bought a new townhouse and rented a room to my friend. I am not currently in um, um, Pittsburgh at all. There's no reason that I'm not in it. I'm just not currently in it. It's a market I definitely would be interested in. I'm just not scaled with a team there yet. And that's sort of the biggest thing for me is if I don't have a team on the ground, this means a couple realtors, a broker, an attorney, and property management. I can't touch the area. I'm just not there and I'm not built out for it yet. I happen to think that's an area I would probably like to get into eventually, but for the moment, it just doesn't fit with the way I'm scaling the business and my money. So good call out. And then again, I think, exactly as we were just talking about here too, like once you move out, you're going to rent that other piece as well. I think this is the way a lot of folks are doing it is like they're hacking their way into wealth. And it makes a lot of sense to do it this way. Um, there is so much pressure, I think, on everyone nowadays, especially sort of in your 20s, especially in your 20s, I'll say, where it's like, if you can't afford a home, you did something wrong and it's your fault and you should be able to buy at the top of the markets. Well, that's bullcrap. I mean, that's totally not true at all. We've seen inflation go through the roof, home prices go through the roof, mortgage rates are going back up. But you know what we haven't seen? Income increase. Not really, not significantly. And I think there's something to be said for finding ways to sort of hack away at the system. And I know a couple of you have talked about it, and I've certainly talked about it. I think it's a no-brainer. You know, if you can get any ability to save more money or get more equity in that home, it's a no-brainer. I think that's definitely the play to make. And I'll tell you, I joke around all the time with my wife that, you know, we have times so funny for years that I'm like, look, you know, I'm just going to start renting out rooms in my house just to get that extra capital so I can keep buying more. But I think it speaks to it. We have I went to an open house a couple weeks ago for a building down the street. I say down the street, probably 5 miles away. And the price was weird. It was listed as a two-family or duplex for those who know that term. So I went there and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was walking around and I was like, wait a minute, I don't understand. There's only two kitchens here, but your list, of course, which you would expect for a duplex. But I said it looks like every room has its own like true apartment style door. And he said, yeah, what they've been doing is they're buying up oversized duplexes and they're turning them into essentially almost like dorm living, where each duplex will have, in theory, 4 tenants, right? And they've really turned it into like what we call efficiency units, where it's a shared bathroom, a shared kitchen, so called in common areas, and then they're just renting the rooms out long term. So I was looking at the numbers because at first I was thinking like, I don't know, this doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It wasn't a great downtown location. And at first I thought like, this must be a pain in the butt. What if there's high turnover? And they were telling me like, no, based on the demographics of like, 20 to 35, there's a lot of folks who are single looking for a place to live. That's not a huge amount of money, but still offering the convenience of being near work. Since seeing that property, I've seen several more like it, and the returns are insane because although they're renting the rooms at relatively low rates, for what it would cost to go and get a one-bedroom apartment is absolutely a fraction of that. So where you might have rented those units out for, call it $2,000 a piece, $2,500 a piece on a regular basis, they're getting 800 or 900 per room, which is obviously far exceeding the returns you'd expect of just renting that out as a duplex. And the financing was no problem. It's duplex financing. What they did afterwards, right? I mean, I guess no one's really saying you can't, so there's no reason you can't do it. I just thought that was really genius. So I'm even seeing that here in my area where more and more we're seeing hacking of investment properties, which is wildly successful if you can pull it off and have a nice setup there. There's actually a property that just hit the market. It's a 5-unit near me, and I'm going to see it this weekend actually. And it's a mixed unit, so there's some office space, and then there's a residential above. And I was looking at the numbers. And my buddy's a realtor, and I was saying to him, like, man, could you get me rates if we were to rent those rooms? I'm not saying I'm going to do that, but because it's literally one town over from me, I don't typically buy where I live, but because it's one town over from me, I was like, geez, that'd be super easy to manage. I wouldn't even need anybody to do it. I could just swing over there anytime I wanted to. So I've seen house hacking done even at a commercial level. So that's pretty interesting stuff as well. And Jason, thanks for sharing that. Jackalope, yeah, you know what? It's funny. I'm actually looking in Lakewood right now to pick up an apartment building. That whole sort of area, Cuyahoga County, that whole area right now, I think the pressure on apartment buildings is extremely, extremely high. And so I'm looking to add about 50 units in that area. I've looked at Lakewood a number of times. You're right. Like Lakewood is a really nice area for those who maybe know Ohio and maybe Cleveland. If you're looking at a map of Cleveland, Lakewood is to the west. It's considered like a B property, a B area. So, very safe, but really reasonable prices. You can pick up some really cool things in that area for pretty cheap money. They're renting pretty well, and they're all beating the 1% rule. I don't want to do competition, so please don't go and do anything. But really, if you're in that area and you're looking to house hack, there's some good 2 families there as well, and 3 and 4 families too, for that matter. So just to call that out. Nate, what's up, man? Thanks for jumping on. Yeah, I hear you. Like, I'm going to be honest with everyone here. If I went back in time, I'm telling you right now, the biggest mistake I made as a young guy was that I bought a single family and I did not buy or start with a 2, 3, 4 family. And the biggest reason for this, bar none, is a 2, 3, and 4 family can still get conventional financing, which means you can get FHA, Fannie and Freddie. Okay. I know I've said this a few times, but it really is worth calling it out again. That means you can qualify for low down payments, even though you're buying a multifamily home. It's absolutely a genius way to get started. It's gonna really increase your ability to grow your wealth to have those units. So even if it's 2 or 3 or 4, you're talking 3.5% down, maybe 5% down. Oh my gosh, unbelievable. Um, if I could do it again, I would do it again, and I'd be buying a 4 family for sure if I could get my hands on it. But even a duplex is still great as well. The beauty of it is you get to live in the building, you get to learn how to manage it, you get a little bit handy with the maintenance work, you can figure out how to work with contractors, but you're so close to it. You're so close, you can really understand the rules, the regulations, how to do things, how to hack it into the right way. And I don't mean hack in terms of like some BS cheap way of doing stuff. I mean, really understand like, hey, how do I stretch the money by getting multiple bids on a construction project? How do I look at restructuring the way I built my rent or my lease? How do I make sure that I'm bringing the right kind of tenants in? And I think it's a good way for folks who are nervous to get started, even though it feels like it's a big deal. It allows you to get experience in managing property, which means when you're ready to go to something bigger, it's not going to be hard to do that. And the beauty of it is when you decide you want to move out, you can refinance that into sort of a regular conforming loan and go and get another FHA loan for your next property as well. You can only have one at a time. So just to call it out, like Nate, I think it's a brilliant plan. And I know I see this here, but like I like Columbus as well. Columbus is another great area for looking at this kind of a play. There's also a lot of really good property managers in the area, or at least a lot of property managers in the area. The nice thing as well about Ohio is it is seen, especially I'm thinking like Cleveland, Cincinnati, Columbus, Toledo. A lot of lenders recognize that these are heavily used as investor areas. So it's not going to be surprising to them that this is what you're looking to do. So there's a lot of good lenders and a lot of good programs for these kind of areas as well. But I'm telling you right now, if you can get 3.5% down, oh, Jackalope from Toledo, cool. If you can get 3.5% down and get yourself into a multifamily, oh my gosh, talk about a leg up on your life. And again, always do things with risk in mind, always protect yourself, always be covered. But I mean, where else can you put 3.5% down and get hundreds of thousands of dollars? Talk about leverage. And then have someone else pay that equity back to you, well, potentially cash flowing on that property as well, to save up to improve the property or save up for your next property. It's an absolute no-brainer for a lot of folks out there, depending on the situation you're in my opinion. So Jason, looking to buy next property as an investment, just want to rent or buying a smaller storage facility used for cash flow. Whew, man. So a couple thoughts on this. And then I'll tell you a real story here too, because I think it's, I often will joke that I'm into lots of things, and it's because frankly I am. So I just want to read that again. My next property as an investment just to rent or buying a smaller storage facility to use as cash flow. I'm going to tell you the absolute full clarity answer here. It depends on the math. Okay. What I'm seeing this depends on the area you're in and the area you're looking at. Storage facilities are starting to become like very interesting properties for people who are traditionally not been in them. So it's causing the prices to increase. I think traditionally I've seen storage facilities do really well, but as the prices have increased, I think what it's doing is it's creating sort of a drag on return on investment or return on ROI. So I think you got to be really careful with the numbers. Make sure you have a team in place, because a storage facility, I want to say the word can, not is, on purpose here. A storage facility can be run with essentially no staff, but it's going to have to make sure that it was built that way. It's properly set up. It has the technology. It has everything you need, because the challenge is going to be, you're probably going to have to sit someone at the front desk. Maybe your plan, Jason, is to have you be that person, but you're going to have to have someone sitting there helping people come in, signing them up, taking their orders. So a storage facility in a lot of ways is like running more like an actual business than an investment. Now, if I'm wrong and you have something in mind that requires no personnel, I stand corrected totally. I'm friendly with a guy in the next town over who owns 2 pretty big facilities. And we were having a conversation about this the other day, that he's putting a lot of technology in place so that like everything's done on an app. Everything is done from a key card. So you sign up online, you get everything delivered online, you get your access key on your phone on the app, so you just scan it when you get there. Rent's collected automatically from a bank account on the app or a credit card or whatever he was doing. I forget what he said. So it was super interesting to hear that. I have never directly owned storage facilities myself, but what I did do a couple of years back is before the market really got crazy, I invested in a company that was looking to become like a publicly traded storage REIT. They're relatively small, and I've actually gotten close to about a 300% gain on that now. So I've done really well on it. They pay a nice dividend. So even if you're thinking about getting into the storage game, one thing I would really suggest doing is actually, I'm going to take a huge pause here because this is advice I've never heard anyone else give, and I do this all the time. So if you're ever looking to say like, what does this guy do that gives him this different degree of way of looking at things than anyone else? I'm going to tell you right now, this is the easiest cheat code ever for massive amounts of value for $0. That's why I'm going to say this also again. If someone is telling you you need to pay for a course or a class or a book or whatever, right? Some guru nonsense. I'm telling you, team, you don't have to pay anyone for this stuff. I will happily answer the questions for free indefinitely. But I'm telling you, there's so much free information out there. You don't need to pay anyone. In fact, I would really, really ask that question, how successful they've been. They're making their money selling courses in the first place. Go to any publicly traded real estate investment trust or REIT, REIT, okay? And go and look at their investor presentation. In these investor presentations is a myriad of unbelievable data, infographics, views of their business. This could be for single families in the cases of like AMH or INVH, which is American Homes for Rent or Invitation Homes. They do single families. Or you could go and look at symbol O, which is for realty income. They do sort of commercial single standing units. And there's companies like Blue Rock, I think is the name. It's BRG is the symbol. I'm not suggesting you buy these symbols, by the way. I'm just saying these are publicly traded real estate companies that have great investor presentations. You will learn so much from looking at them. So I would really strongly urge you to do that. It just gives you an idea of like where they're investing, why they're investing, and what they're getting for returns. Because these huge companies have lots of highly skilled people working there. They've got great structures. And I'm telling you, as a new investor, you can steal their designs and try to build what they're building, but in a small way so that you're efficiently building it the right way right from step one. So if you've never heard that before, start checking out publicly traded REITs and look at their investor presentations and decks, and all the numbers are in there, all the things they're doing, all the areas they're investing in, how they're buying, what kind of debt they have, what kind of vacancy ratios they're seeing. Free. And it's audited because they're reporting it publicly. So where else are you going to go for free and get all that information? So please definitely check that out. So to answer the question, Jason, sorry for the long diatribe. I really think it comes down to the math. The other thing to consider too is I don't know your big plans and certainly don't feel like you have to share them. But depending on, are you just doing this because you're trying to get some extra income, or is your plan to build a big company? That also should be part of the process of how you're buying and why you're buying what you're buying as well. So just to call that out. So Nate, I'll call it, so Jackalope. Yeah. Over in Berea, I don't know Berea well, but I've definitely been in that area. I'm not from that area, but I get out there quite a bit. And then Nate, you're in Columbus. Jackalope, you're in Toledo. My gosh, you guys are like my Ohio crew. I'm gonna, maybe someday we're all gonna be working together to run Ohio here. So really interesting. You had 8 rental homes in Toledo at one point and been selling. You know, I know a lot of folks who got into these different markets within Ohio a couple of years back, and they are 100% getting out at these prices, not for negative reasons, but you know, they were buying homes for 25, 30K, and they're getting out of them now in the hundreds, not huge hundreds, but 100, 110, 120. If you can get a 3 or 4x return on your money, there's a good reason to consider selling, or at a minimum, maybe refinance into a portfolio loan from the question I was asked earlier. So you can free up that capital and go and buy some more with it or use it for collateral. So good call. Nate, just to answer the question. So like, I think this is a really, really good question. And it also begs the question though, of what other types of programs exist to help you do this. So, you need 2 years of W-2 income in order to get a mortgage loan. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to BS you for to buy a place that you're going to live in, whether it's a 1 to 4 unit. Any conventional conforming program, which is what you need to get, frankly. I don't want anyone to be like, oh, there's other programs. There are other programs. But realistically speaking, for a low down payment program to buy a place you're going to live in, it could be a condo, a single family, whatever it is, you do typically need to have 2 years of W-2 income. What I would really urge, though, is if you have like, self-employed, or you have strong assets, or you have investments that are generating income, there can be conversations to be had based on the price range, what you're going to put down, all those things, that sometimes are ways around it. But like 9 out of 10 times, they're going to want to see 2 years W-2, 2 weeks, I'm sorry, 2 years of tax returns, which is going to be those W-2 income. And what they're really looking for is 2 years in the same job. Just to be really specific here, it's not enough just to have 2 years of W-2 income. They want it to be like 2 years in essentially doing the same thing. So it can't be like, oh, here I worked as a cashier for 6 months, and I was a waiter for 6 months, and then I was a manager for 6 months, then I went to construction for 6 months. What they want to see is consistency in the way that you're earning your income. So you might work in sales at one company for a year, move to another company in sales for a year, and that might be okay because you're still in sales and maybe still selling the same thing. But they're going to want to see some consistency in that income that they can predict against. So, this is always going to be the problem with buying when you're young. But, and this is a big one, this is something to really think about, Nate, specifically to you here. You're saying here that you have 1099 income. So one thing to consider is, we're talking about your traditional conforming government-backed programs. If I was you, and I mean like today, I might be on a Sunday might be tough, but maybe tomorrow then, well, tomorrow's Labor Day, so maybe Tuesday, I guess. What I would do is find a local credit union if you're not already working with a credit union, and just go and say to them like, look, I want to purchase a single family, I want to purchase a home, whatever that looks like, and here's the situation. And they might have something they can do for you. You'd be really surprised at what a credit union can do to structure something for someone who has good 1099s, or someone who has good. Well, actually, let me ask you a question. Is the 1099 because you're self-employed? Because if it's self-employment, there are programs for that as well. So just to call that out, they're going to be able to potentially work around that as well. But at the end of the day, if you can prove that you have the income to pay your mortgage, usually there's a way around it. Just to call that out. You might not get a good low down payment. You might get a higher rate. You might have something else that's got to give to get it done. But I don't think it's a reason necessarily to run away. Okay. So, and Nate, I know you're a young dude just getting started, but good relationship with a local credit union. 780 is amazing. 3 years of credit. If you've got a good relationship, they can see your bank statements, assuming you're there, or even otherwise, you can get them copies of it, and you can show strong 1099s. For me personally, I'm not the type that thinks no is ever the answer. I usually just think like, no, not this way. Let me find a different way. So if I'm you, I'm going to go out and do that as well. Have you considered too just the idea of having someone else be a cosigner? Again, like, I don't know the financial situation, but your parents potentially could offer some support here, and just, work something out with them that you're going to try to get out of it as soon as possible. And I know that's a tough thing, so I'm not, again, no delusions here, but, just something to consider as well. One thing to think about too, there are different ways to think about doing this, where perhaps you just want to find a way to sort of get into something, from a W-2 perspective, even at the bank, or go and start looking to get a loan origination license and work in something like that as well. Just different ideas that maybe are worth doing, something to call out. That's all. But my 2 cents is, I would call the credit union specifically and just say to them, like, what would have to happen for me to be able to do it? And then they're going to tell you the real truth of what it is. If they're like, look, no way, it's not going to happen, then you've got a year to save up money to get yourself in a better position when you are ready to do it with W-2 or whatever the case is. So that's my 2 cents on that topic. Jason, so definitely want to start a company within real estate. Plan is to have 4 main pillars of investment: real estate, stocks, angel investing, and sports betting, because my friends are doing so well in it. Yeah, like I would say my takeaway is really, I think too many folks, I'm not saying it's you, by the way, too many folks look at it from the standpoint of real estate is I'm either selling it, I'm investing in it, or I'm doing something else in it, right? I think that there's a million ways you could start a company related to real estate that have nothing to do with owning real estate. You could start a service. Actually, I mean, anyone who watches this for relatively cheap money, you can go and get a Facebook page for free. And you could look at, like, I'm just gonna pick the first thing that came to my mind, Cleveland. And you'd start like the new home buyers, um, what to do in Cleveland Facebook page. And you can go to all the businesses in Cleveland and charge them some small dollar amount to be listed on your page, and then have a website that you pay $20 for, or $10, and build a free one pager and list all, hey, here's the top grocery stores and restaurants and retail stores and nursery schools. And here's a list of all of the schools. Here's a list of all the important phone numbers to have, right? So getting into real estate doesn't necessarily mean you have to go and buy an apartment building for $5 million. You could do something that's hyper local that you can just generate some money from, and that money over time will give you enough to get started and start to have those relationships. I mean, I'm going to go back here probably 15 years. So we'll bring you guys back in the past a little bit. A buddy of mine really wanted to get into commercial real estate. He had no experience, and he was thinking, like, man, how do I do this? And we were coming up with some ideas. This is actually more than 15 years ago now. I'm saying it out loud, probably like 25 years ago. But um, I was like, man, I'll tell you what, if I had no money to get into real estate, I'd walk down to a hardware store. I'd get a bucket, a couple of sponges, a squeegee, and a spray bottle. And I'd be walking around to local businesses asking if I can clean their windows and charge some decent dollar amount so I can make some money and start getting relationships with all these different people and talk about the idea of how I'm going to help them. I'd love to do this on a regular basis, start a recurring business. And now I'd then turn that into, like, hey, there are other things I can do to help you manage these properties. I think there's a million different ways to think about starting a real estate company that has nothing at all to do with having the money to own, invest in, or buy real estate at scale. I think that's the perfect way to do it too, is you offer a valuable service that helps you get into the good graces of people who are doing it. And I don't think much has changed today. I think information is easy and cheap. I think you can offer services at scale for no money on your back. I mean, I take advantage of what I can that cost me nothing when I got started to generate some degree of availability or skill set. The other thing I want to call out here, I think, for anyone who's watching this, if you're not part of an REIA, you're probably making a major mistake. If you are really serious about getting into real estate investing, this isn't just about buying a single family here. If you're really serious about getting into investing and you're not part of an REIA, you are massively missing the boat here for free connections to brokers, connections to real estate. I mean, to mortgage for real estate, services, the flips, the contracts, the devs, the investors. So an REIA is a real estate investment association. They're local, and there's one city over from me. In where I live, there's probably 20 of them, but there's one that literally is one city over, and they're typically pretty cheap. Like, you pay $20 to go as a guest. Maybe it's 250 bucks for a year membership. And usually once a month they'll do a get together at like a restaurant, or they'll rent space at a hotel or something like that. It's always relatively cheap. But the one near me has something like 50 to 200 people that go on a regular basis, and they go there to talk about deals, to network, to talk to other people who are in the space. And there are always a couple of there's never a lot, but there's always a couple of younger folks who are like, hey, I have no money, I don't have a good job, I want to be a big time real estate investor someday. What I can do is I can help you find leads. I can help you clean the job sites of flips you're working on. I can help you file and enter paperwork. But the goal is, your ask is not for cash or a paycheck necessarily. Your ask really specifically is, how can I start to learn the business from the ground up? And maybe that means sweeping floors and taking trash out. Maybe this means, yeah, an REIA, Leo, exactly. Yeah. So I would literally just Google, like, the state and local REIA, and there's going to be some that pop up. It's a national organization and they have local chapters. Um, if you're serious about getting serious and you don't have the means to do something yet, at a minimum, this is a good way to see what's going on in the area meet some people who are doing similar things, and then offer your services or your help in return. I'm going back a couple of years, by the way, so just apologies, but I was at one a while back where a couple of folks were like, "Look, I would love nothing more than to learn how to flip a property. I don't even know where to begin." And there's a dude who flips a lot of houses that goes on a regular basis, and he was like, "Do you want to come and just walk some properties that we're currently flipping? We'll explain what we paid, what things cost, who we hire, the whole process." And for a lot of those younger folks in the audience, it was an amazing opportunity to not only meet a major flipper in the area who makes a lot of money, but see his process, see how it works. He shared the paperwork with them. This same thing goes for investors. Like I mentor a couple of people right now who are trying to learn how to get into the negotiation side of things, finding the deals, how to not be scared of making offers, how to look at the math really quickly and be able to act quickly, what you have to pull together to get stuff done. So that for sure is a major place that I would start, especially if the fear of getting involved is credit or debt or whatever or skill set. Those are all things that are overcome, right? You gain the skill set and now you have something of value to add. Once you have the value to add, you can start charging for your services. Once you start charging your services, you're going to have more income and more ability to make and work on deals. And the other thing too, that's really a brilliant way to think about it. And again, always protect yourself and be careful. But if you want to generate some cash to buy your first rental, well, maybe you can partner with someone on a flip and be able to pull a little bit of money out on that. Then you can do it again, maybe do it again after that. And this is a great way to start to generate and build not only the skill set, but the relationships with the borrowers and the lenders, relationships with the agents, and get some cash at the same time. So there's a lot of different ways to think about it. There's a lot of ways to get into it. And it doesn't just have to be sitting on Zillow waiting for a property to hit that's in the price range you can afford. That maybe isn't a good deal that you're buying just because it's cheap. So that's my 2 cents. And I'll tell you right now, like, I don't have any stuff going on like that right now. But if someone came to me and said, "Hey, I'd love to come to the property. I can help you do some demo or help bring some trash out or help, mow the lawn to make it look nice." Number one, I would pay them. And number two, I would be happy. I would say yes in a heartbeat. Of course, I would love to help anybody as well as get that support in the projects I'm working on. So that's just my 2 cents there. The other thing as well is like, it doesn't cost anything to build a website for leads and then bring those leads to an investor and say, "Hey, look, if you close the deal, throw me $500, right?" Every area has different rules. So just to be clear, but like there's lots of creative ways to think about getting into real estate without being in real estate. Okay. Or without that. So of course, the most obvious piece here that I think everyone should think about is why not go and get your real estate license, right? Like, yeah, there's going to be a little bit of a cost to it, but that's a license to print money for life. Maybe you have to maintain a couple $100 a year, but if you can find your way to one deal a year, you're going to pay for the training and you're going to make a little bit of money on it. And this also helps you to put more money away. You've got back end access to all the properties the minute they hit MLS. And you can also meet a lot of people who do it as well. I think there's so many reasons to think about it. So again, that's my 2 cents. Hey, Curtis, how are you? I think for me personally, if you want to be an investor, you got to find an angle to have some sort of an edge over everyone else. And I would say that this is probably, I know this is a long show and not everyone's going to get to this part of it, but if you think you're going to become, Johnny big time investor and you're going to outcompete all of the big firms and the big players, you need to be asking yourself, what is my edge? What is the edge that I have that helps me to beat other people in the markets that I work in? For me, I have a reputation that if I say I'm going to close, I'm going to close. I can buy immediately. I'll write a check. So I'm a known, right? If I want something, there's no BS. If I say I'm going to buy it, I'm going to buy it. And of course, the numbers have to work out and pass all the inspections, etc. But when I say to a broker, I want it, they're telling all the other buyers to get out of the way. He's coming to buy it. If that's my edge. My edge is I have a reputation that I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do. Your edge can be that you have first access to investment properties. Your edge can be that you are a loan originator and you can see where rates are going ahead of time, right? Your edge can be that you generate tons of leads. Your edge can be that you are offering to, do discounted work to get relationships. I have another friend, just to sort of go off on a tangent here, who really wants to get into apartment buildings, has zero experience, but has a little bit of money from having a good job. And I had said to him, like, what you should do is go and find, a local apartment building. I'm not talking about like one that's owned by a mega gigantic company. Go and find a local apartment building and see if they would be willing to let you essentially just intern there. And he's like, listen, I'm 35, I make really good money. Why would I do that? And my point to him is, you want to get into something that you're going to spend millions of dollars on, but you don't even know how it works. You don't know the back end. You don't know what it takes to run a property. You don't understand who has to be involved in it. Now, if that's the case and you're going to outsource all those things, you're going to get hammered on pricing. Your margins are going to be mega thin, and you're not going to know when someone's taking advantage of you. So, with that being said as well, and Nate, maybe I'll just call you out here. Like, I would wonder if you can go and get like an assistant property management job somewhere for a couple hours a week, 20 hours a week, even get that W-2 taken care of, and also have that back end experience of knowing how to write up leases and do the work. So again, that's my perspective on it. But I think there's a lot of ways to get involved. Even from the standpoint of like, there's a lot of leasing companies near me that have people who just go out and dump the barrels, clean up the parking lots. But again, you're making connections. It's all about the connections. I know I hate to just drone on here, so I'll stop. But I guess my point is, if you're serious about growing serious wealth, and that's sort of the takeaway here, real wealth. I don't mean like, someday I want to own 2 rental units, which by the way is still great. And don't let anyone tell you it's not. That is a great thing. But if you're thinking and you're like, hey, I love the idea of like, I want to have 20, 25, 100 units, and I want to generate 50,000 a month in rent. Well, the same that it would take you 30 years to do that in the stock market, it's going to take you 30 years to do it if you don't have some sort of an edge or an advantage. And this means either getting access to the deals, access to the money, or access to the people who are going to lease it out. So the more you can do to fill the gap of knowledge while also earning or building a reputation, the better it's going to be. Because when you go to that credit union or to a bank or to an asset lender, and you say, look, I want to put 20% down on this 50 unit building, they're going to say, sure, the numbers look good. How are you going to manage this building? And you say, well, great news. I've actually been involved in managing properties of similar size. I know how to lease an apartment out. I know what it costs and how to get connections to contractors to come in and keep my margins low. Those are all things that are going to help you build that resume of how you become successful at what you do. I think too many times we approach serious investing as a whim. Like, you know what? It'd be nice to have a 4-family, so I'll go buy one. Great. You can do that. But can you do it in a way where you're optimizing income? Can you do it in a way where you're getting the best rates, the best deals? Can you guarantee you're always going to have someone renting it out? Those are the advantages you can bring to the table that'll make sure that your units stay rented and other people's maybe don't, or they have to cut their prices, or they have to spend more money to update them. So that's sort of a bit of a diatribe, but my true feeling on the topic in general. So I've been going on an hour and 18 minutes here. I don't know if there's any more questions or any more thoughts, but if not, I can call it a day here. I do appreciate all the great stuff everyone's bringing here. I love the questions. I think it's really important to understand this. But I would really sort of sum it up here at 1:18 to say, there are countless opportunities to get experience in this space. You can't go into the NFL and make a couple $1 million a year because you picked up a football because you like to watch it on TV. And I think too many people will go on YouTube and watch a big time investor, talk about all their units, but who knows if they even have them. Or you can go on Twitter and listen to the threads of how I bought 50 units, but then they can't actually answer any questions, or the answers are like so generic out of a book. It's unbelievable. Talk to the property managers, talk to lenders, talk to agents who specialize in commercial, talk to people who are doing development work, ask questions in the chat here and connect on Twitter, whatever you want to do. But make sure you're getting relevant experience that compounds over time so that you understand how a lease works. Then you understand how to lease at scale. You understand why a property manager has so much cost, right? Do the work, put in the effort, then make the $50,000 a month. But don't watch a 14-minute video and think you're going to make $6 million a year. It's not that simple. There has to be a foundation built, no pun intended. There has to be a foundation built upon which your knowledge will live to grow your empire as you go. So, Jackalope, thank you. You enjoy your weekend. Everyone who watched, I really appreciate it. I don't care if 3 people join this, as long as 3 people get value from it. So I'll keep doing it unless you guys tell me we've hit every question that could ever be asked and it's a waste of time. So with that said, many, 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 many thanks for jumping on and joining. Really appreciate everybody asking the questions. Nate, tomorrow night, I know I keep saying it. Let me know if you're free. We can hook up for a conversation. Otherwise, everybody, thanks so much for jumping on. Seriously, really appreciate it. Love to share the knowledge. Anything I can do to help, let me know, team. Thanks so much. Bye, everybody.